Welcome to Designing Cities for All, another episode, and it's part of our 2-year-long activity and research program,
where we take a deep dive into designing products, spaces, and systems for all.
Just because you feel safe, or you feel welcome, or you feel included, doesn't mean that everyone else around you feels the same way.
We don't stand alone. We're not individuals that somehow a planet or an island, you know?
And I think that's the beautiful thing of a diverse society, that everyone can add something from out of their own experience.
Things won't change just if we just let things happen.
I think if you can build relationships and use design as a tool to build those relationships, the better off we're all going to be.
Everything around us was once designed and can therefore be redesigned.
Belonging is a very, very important concept.
You can try to take someone's place for a while, but you don't have the lived experience.
Let's begin by acknowledging similarity and affinity.
Be a person, not your role.
I think inclusion is not a choice.
Inclusion happens by design or not at all.
In order to create truly inclusive public spaces that are accessible to everyone, we have to underline what everyone actually is.
Real inclusion, it's got nothing to do with the norm, but it's like something that we create from all different perspectives.
You know, so even when we bring everybody at the table, does everybody's voice count the same?
Because it's a big question of who tells these stories.
You know, the more I explore about other cultures, other religions, is the more ingredients I have to make the architecture and to answer the questions I get from society.
Not fitting in was a blessing, or I would have turned out just like you.
A very good evening and a warm welcome to you from Pakhuis de Zwijger. After a well-deserved summer break, we're here to start it off again with Designing Cities for All. And this first show deals with the educational system. Because, like I said, we had several programs at Designing Cities for All. And when you redesign a city, when you redesign a space, we shouldn't forget about education. I will tell you a little bit more about that later on. But first, I'd like to mention that we're slowly heading to the final 6 months of our 2-year-long projects. It was 2 years of diving deep into systems, diving deep into designing products and places for all, where inclusivity was very important. From the past Designing Cities for All programs, we've seen that in the educational system, there are a lot of defects, where it goes from flawed exams to flawed evaluation systems, and even dominant Eurocentric views, systematic racism, and not to consider how to deal with students with different needs. In today's program, Breaking the Mould, we will explore what student thinks about these topics and how they can create their own voice in the design field. We will reflect on this with a lot of nice guests like Marijke Lucas, Charmaine de Heij, Jonathan Tang, Daisy Dawson, and Priscilla Namwanje, who is joining us through Zoom from Kampala. Tonight we welcome people in our studio. Nice to have you here. Maybe you can let yourself be heard as well. There you are. But you at home can join into our conversation as well. And that is possible if you go with any device to menti.com. There you will be asked for a code. And the code tonight is 9551-2224. If you head to Menti and you use that code, you can ask questions as well. And they will be guided here to my iPad. And make sure that you mention who the question is for, so I can make sure that the right question is aimed at the right person. So let's get started. And I would like to introduce my first guest to you. That is Marijke Lucas. She's a designer, researcher, graduate master of education in the arts. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
Marijke, you've started to work as a graphic designer, and you've worked in the field for, well, I can say many, many years.
Thank you.
But you transitioned from being a designer into education and arts.
Yes. Well, actually, I still feel more a designer than an educator.
Mm-hmm.
And I graduated from Design Academy Eindhoven, which makes me a designer.
Mm.
But my background is more in communication design, so it's also more broad than just graphic design. And I guess it counts for a lot of us that the COVID pandemics was a moment of reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was really because when I graduated and also in my training, I was really encouraged to develop my own individual artistic vision on design. And also, yeah, we were really encouraged to become independent designer and show our authentic signature. And for me, actually, it was always more important to work together than to get individuals successful.
Mm-hmm.
And I struggled with this. And then I came across the work of Victor Papanek,
mm-hmm.
and especially his suggestion that all design is education. That really inspired me to go back to school.
What does that mean, all design is education?
To me, it means that all design tells a story, and it wants the user to experience something new or something more, or to make your life better, or, thank you. To experience something new, actually, yeah.
You're writing your master's thesis and you research some current design discourses. And one of your main topics is the multiple perspectives that should be there. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
It also has to do with the way I was trained, because I feel that in my time at Design Academy Eindhoven, the Bauhaus was very important.
And still is, because in the European context there's been mentioned the new Bauhaus.
Yes.
But that wasn't really... No, what's your criticism on the Bauhaus? Where to start?
I don't really want to criticize it. I just would like to open up this frame of references, and to make space for more ideas and other ideas on or more ideas than just form follows function or less is more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was a very male-dominated view on the world as well, wasn't it? Bauhaus.
How can
male-dominated?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry.
That's
true.
But if you talk about those multiple perspectives, how can you include them? And is it possible to include all perspectives?
I'm not sure about that. I think it is important that we open ourselves up to all these other perspectives and to research them together. So, because the educational system, as I experienced it, was this is the way it should be and that's how you're going to do it. And I think that should change. And it can only change from the inside. So I would suggest that we investigate this together and then, listen to each other.
And your research, funnily enough, at least funny for me, led into a game.
Yes.
How do you go from researching your thesis, researching different kinds of topics, to a game?
You can consider the game as a game and play it. You can. And you can see it as an invitation to do this research, to research in which way your frames of references are conditioned, or hopefully it will awaken some sort of reflective consciousness. But you can also read the game as a master thesis and look at the game as a metaphor, actually, or as an illustration to the thesis.
Yeah, because it's about de-learning.
Yes.
De-design. Okay, can you translate the three major topics?
Yeah,
from
in
the
Dutch it's called ontleer, ontwerp, ontkader, and in English that would be deframe, unlearn, or design. That sounds, or de-learn. That sounds better, and then design together. Yeah.
Right. And can you tell us a little bit about the main idea behind the game and what you, because it's a very democratic game, and this is the first game that I saw where the game maker apologizes for their own perspective.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, one of the conclusions of my research was that if you talk about conditioned references and opening up these frames, it's not right to just tell what the next step should be. So I didn't want to prescribe anything, and I certainly didn't want to create new frames. So it's all about researching your own frames, and then maybe together.
But I'm confused because the game doesn't. They do contain rules, but you can add rules as well. But you can leave out rules.
Yes.
There's no winner.
No.
Which is, in the game is quite frustrating for me as somebody who likes to, I'm very competitive in that sense.
Yeah.
And you can decide yourself when it ends or when it doesn't end.
That's true.
But it's not a game anymore then, is it?
It's not a competitive game.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it really is about the process.
Yes, it is.
It facilitates the process in order to discuss with each other and to learn with each other.
That's right.
When people play the game, what's the biggest takeaway you would like to give them?
I hope that it raises more questions. And I hope that that by playing the game, you really discover, okay, so I look at the world from this perspective, and because I was born here or with these parents, or I got the opportunity to follow this education, that gives me a certain position from which I look at the world. And then it comes back to the form follows function dogma. I think that we should, or we may, I do not want to prescribe anything, we may look at it more as, form follows context. Look at the context, or the form follows perspective, or my position, or the position for whom I'm designing for, and so on.
When you designed this game, who was involved in the development of it?
Some colleagues, some design colleagues, and some friends.
How inclusive was it?
At the time, I think it was not that inclusive, but it depends on what you how do you define inclusive, of course.
Well,
yeah.
We'll talk about the game a bit later as well. And at the end of the program, when the broadcast is over, we will actually play the game here. So I don't know until when we're going to be here, because there's no end to it. So maybe we'll be here till tomorrow morning. But thank you for now.
Thank you.
Our next guest, Daisy Dawson, is a social designer, a neurodiverse activist, and a fourth-year bachelor student at the Design Academy Eindhoven. A warm welcome to you as well. I described you just now as a neurodiverse activist. What actually does that mean?
First of all, I'm neurodiverse. And I just feel, in a way, when you're neurodiverse and you talk openly about it, you become a form of activist. And I'm quite lucky because I have the privilege to come to these type of shows or be an activist at school. And so I feel like for me, being an activist is giving voices to people who aren't normally heard, and to try and represent them as fairly as possible.
What's your definition of neurodiversity?
That's a whole new story. Like there's this, and there's, as I was explaining a bit earlier, that there's these, it's kind of became a phase where we would talk about neurodiversity only in a medical way.
Can you give examples?
For example, I only like talking about what I know. So, for example, I'm neurodiverse because I have a dyslexia and dyscalculia and other things, but these are the two I'm comfortable with saying. And what's nice with the word neurodiverse is that you don't have to say your diagnosis. You just say, I'm neurodiverse. You don't have to say, oh, I have autism, or I have ADHD, because it's quite a private matter. So if you have, and what's good with neurodiversity is that you're a group. You're represented as a group, and not just, oh, that's an autistic kid, that's a dyslexic kid. I'm neurodiverse. That's what it is.
But it does raise more questions than it answers. Is that because people do get curious of what exactly is at the, how do you say that? What exactly is your case?
Yeah,
or your
diagnosis? It's none of their business.
Why not?
Because it's my. Because we are not in a society where people accept differences. So, like, if I go to a job interview and I'm like, oh, I'm actually dyslexic and neurodiverse and whatever other things I have, I might not get that job just because I have that. So there's also this game you have to play where you're neurodiverse, but you have to hide it. And it's just a very intense labor to do on a day-to-day basis.
I do understand that. And also, at the same time, I've got the question, because doesn't this new label keep the taboo there? Because if you don't talk about being neurodiverse in a specific case, the taboo will be there. You know, the taboo on dyslexia or autism will stay there.
That's where design comes in. That's where people who aspire to be designers, or people like me who care about the subjects, we could design school programs. We can. So instead of every unique person have to describe their whole life story just to justify my existence. Oh, you're dyslexic. I know what that means. Oh, that's actually really cool. Oh, you're autism. It's a cool thing. Instead of, it goes by education. And I just think it's not my role as a human to justify what neurodiversity is, because I'm not in the mood all the time. Here, I'm happy doing it because it's like a time I planned in my day. Yeah. But it's labor, and I'm sick of giving free labor.
Yeah,
and also Google exists.
Google's your friend. I also mentioned that people who are neurodiverse are designers at heart as well. Yeah. There's a connection. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Actually, I have this theory that I'm developing for my from the end of my school year, and it's called designer by default. So for me, when you're neurodiverse, you're in a world that isn't designed for you, because the way we've designed the world is very normed. You know, like a seat in a bus should be a certain size or a certain height, and it's mainly based on white men. Yeah. And basically, when you're a designer by default or neurodiverse, you have to learn how to design to fit into the world. So from a very young age, you learn tools, or you learn design thinking to be able to fit in. And I want to do a text, a dyslexic text on how that works, and how people for me who are neurodiverse are already designers, and that's why a lot of them are in design schools.
Right. If you look at the student body or neurodiverse students, what challenges do they experience in day-to-day study life?
Well, I'm again going to talk for myself, because as a neurodiverse person, I truly believe that you can't fit everyone in a box. And just because I'm dyslexic doesn't mean the other person who has dyslexia will have the same. So I always do that disclaimer. But for example, for me, I can't read the time. Like, I need 3 different types of watches to understand the notion of time. Or I don't understand the notion of distance. Or I have a very hard time with hierarchy. Like, I just don't understand the notion of hierarchy. So as a designer, that's great tools to have. But on a day-to-day basis with human interaction, being here on time, like, it takes me one extra hour per day just to get somewhere on time, because I need 1 hour to understand a station, because it's letters, it's numbers, it's the time. It's very stressful. Yeah. And so it's just a lot of extra things that people don't think about.
How can a educational school or university cater to those specific needs?
Well, I think we have to see it all as a general situation. But for example, I just think just having a bit of recognition, and also having the tutors know what it is, and also a great way for me to do this would to be to grade accordingly. To have a different version of grading for different types of students. If we can't change the whole building, which probably won't be the case for very long years, just like small hacks you can do on a day-to-day basis, but training, education, and just adaptation and redesigning would be amazing. And I think everyone would benefit from it, because what I needed for a classroom to be the healthiest for me would make a lot of sense for even non-neurodiverse people. It would just
but the knowledge within a school system isn't there, so it often becomes the responsibility of the students. How do you look at that?
Well, first of all, I feel that we should pay students to give feedback to schools, because it's very labor intensive, and it's not just coming to a table and talking and then leaving. It's writing reports, it's being present on a certain time. And I think Design Academy, for my school, they're making some progress, but just by the time, like, I just feel there's an urgency. And like, by the time I'm leaving the school, there's finally change, but there could have been faster changes to make me feel more comfortable in a school that I'm paying to be into.
Yeah. And they should listen to students, but also students should be rewarded for the time and energy.
Well, it's a job. Giving constructive feedback shouldn't just be a free commodity right now. It's a real substance. It's a currency. Yeah. and they need it, so they should be paying for it.
I just spoke to Marijke about all different kinds of perspectives. Is that something you recognize as well?
Yeah, I could really identify with what Marijke was saying. And yeah, we are also from the same school, but from different generations of school. And we were talking about how things change, but very slowly. And it's something you have to learn to live with, I guess. But as an activist and someone who sees people missing out on amazing opportunities to learn, I can't just let that fly, because it's just not right. Like, the education should be the only place where it's equal chance for it. Well, it should be every place, but it's the only place where we say it's equal chance. But I don't see the equal chance.
Right. We will come back to you later as well, but I'd like to introduce our next guest. Priscilla Background is an urbanist, researcher, and graduate at urbanism at the TU Delft, and is joining us through Zoom. Priscilla, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clearly as well. You're currently doing some research work in Kampala. It's one of the most interesting places I've ever been to in my life. So I'm quite jealous that you actually do research there. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're researching at the moment? Because it's about urban development, right?
Yes. My interest is looking at informal settlements predominantly, and trying to understand how these informal cities come to be, how they are made, how they are built, how people that live there are able to sustain themselves with very minimal input from formal institutions and formal planning. So that's really where my interest lies.
Yeah, because if you look at city development in Kampala, it's different from the Netherlands, where everything is being thought out, everything is being planned as well. It's a more informal development of the city. Why is that a challenge or even a problem at sometimes?
I mean, I think I wouldn't call it a challenge. Actually, I would call it an opportunity. It happens to be the reality that we have. So, and I believe it's common in most formerly colonized African cities. So we have one side of the planning, which is really formal and very institutional and actually quite Eurocentric, the ideals. And then we have the reality, which is informal. So what we have right now is that the two are running parallel to each other. So there's not much feedback, there's not much communication between the two. And so the effort to tackle urban challenges is divided, so to speak. I think there is an opportunity to leverage both. I don't think one is better than the other, or one should be more pronounced than the other, but both have ideas that we can work with as urbanists and see that we achieve sustainable development.
We could fill a whole program, I believe, just in regard to the topics that you mentioned. But we are talking about the educational system. You studied at the TU Delft. How did you experience studying there?
I enjoyed my study at TU Delft. It was good to see different, maybe let me say, schools of thought, or see the way European cities are actually designed. For me, it was interesting because there were very many similarities with my education for my bachelor, which I did here in Kampala. So to see that still, even while I'm in Kampala, my education was still very based on very Eurocentric ideas, and then coming to TU Delft and actually seeing the origin of these ideas and being in Europe, seeing the kind of cities that stem from these ideas and knowing that, you know, that is actually not a reality for Kampala and might never be a reality for Kampala. So it was interesting for me to keep
I've got an example of that. What is a very Eurocentric idea that you were being taught in Kampala that might not apply to the city at all?
It's the street paths, like pedestrian paths, are paved and extremely straight, like people walk in a line, and all, let me say, activities like trade shops, for example, are all locked up into buildings. I can see it here. I mean, having been in Europe, I could see it there. But when I reflect back in Kampala, everything is a bit less planned. It's more organic, and it's really led by people and what they want to do, and then they inform how the result comes to be.
Right. Right. Yeah, I do recognize what you say about the more organic layout of the city as well. You mentioned that you aim to use your career in urbanism to support global South cities in the global South and to become more inclusive and sustainable. How did you go about in your studies to research that?
What I focused on was to look at the theory, the methodologies, and the tools that are very available for an urbanist like myself. What can I use to be able to explore this kind of research? And if you, when you look at my thesis, something I tried to really explore was a pattern language, which basically is more a very simple graphical method that helps to document practices and simplify the field or the art of planning for the common man. And so how do you go about that? How do you work with different creatives actually to create these kind of patterns that people can read so they can store information and then they can start to inform how better design decisions can be made.
Right. And what you applied in your thesis as well, so the new informal, we did talk about that a little bit earlier. And you researched there the just, resilient and sustainable urban development in Kampala. Can you share some insights that could also help other students that would like to work in the Global South?
Yes, I can. Be open-minded. Try to have a mindset that every city is unique, and so do not come with a very predetermined idea of what a good city is. In most cases, the people who live in these places know what is good for them. So we have to go in with an attitude of learning, very open-minded and willing to learn and to change our mindset actually on what we've always thought is the right way to go. There's many forms of creation. There's many ways cities can be made. And I think if you have the right mindset, then you should be able to go ahead and do something in the Global South.
But at the same time, sometimes rules can help, because if you look at Kampala, which is growing like every other city as well, so urbanization is happening quite quickly, but also people are building their homes in wetlands or on grounds that are not suitable for yet for living. How do you go about that? Because that happens organically, but it's not a sustainable situation where people can still live. How do you go about that?
Yes, so I believe the answer is working with both. Yes, rules are important, but rules have to be applied to a certain context and they have to suit the context. So the reason, for example, people are building in wetlands has to do with lack of affordable housing, or people want to live near where they work and the only available space that they can afford is within the wetland. So the solution there may not necessarily be to get people off the wetland, but holistically to look at how can Kampala start to address the issue of affordable housing. How can we allow people to build their own homes, but then limit the extent to which they probably damage the environment? So it's a balance. You kind of have to work on both sides and see what is fair and what is just for everyone.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Priscilla, for your insights as well. We will return to you later, but I still have two guests that I would like to introduce to you as well. So a warm welcome to you, Jonathan Tang and Charmaine De Hey. You're both master students in photography and society at the KPCB. Can you tell us a little bit more about the study of photography and society? What does that entail?
Socially involved students.
Mm-hmm.
I think open-minded students, if I have to be honest. And people who, not everybody, but some people want to make change, or some want to talk about their culture. it really depends on the individual student. But it's not a study you have to go to if you are really egocentric and things like that. Yeah.
But it's a visual arts study. So how does that combine like the social engagement that the students feel, or activism in some cases, with the development of their arts?
Yeah, so what's really interesting about photography is that it has changed in the last maybe 10 years so much if you compare to like traditional photography. I think we as human beings, or we as art lovers, all have this grand idea of what a photographer is. But if we look around now, is that actually everyone can be a photographer now, because everyone has a cell phone. And I think most of the people have Instagram or TikTok. So what we as students of photography and society actually believe is that photography can be a medium to make the world a better place, or at least make the world a more beautiful place. And I believe, that's really important as a student of our program.
Can you give an example of that? How can you make the world a more beautiful place?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think it really depends on the individual, but if I talk from my own perspective, because I cannot talk for all the students, I think for me, change comes through a confrontation by showing people things that they don't want to see in society.
You're not in agreement. How does that in practice work? Can you give an example of work that you made or presented during your studies?
Yeah, so the last project I did is called Lux 731, in which I reproduced chemical experiments that were done on prisoners during the Second World War. And I think as an artist or as a photographer, or how you want to call it, you have the freedom to decontextualize objects or people or images, and in that way confront the viewer of our society to think about it, to think about what are ethics in general, like what are scientific ethics, but also what is the norm, or what do we believe in?
Is this your work as well?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Unit 731 was a research facility which was established in the Second World War by the Japanese Imperial Army. And the doctors, they called their prisoners Maruta, which means lock of wood. And what I was trying to find out was how these doctors could dehumanize others. So I basically reproduced all the, not all of them, but some of the chemical experiments to experience what they experienced.
And what result did it have for you?
Yeah, it was pretty tense. But what's interesting is that at some point you get in this flow and you don't think about it anymore because you're so focused on a goal. And so at some point I felt that I was trying to humanize an inhuman object, which is in this case a log of wood, but it took a lot of effort and also energy. And yeah, so at some point I didn't feel emotional anymore, or emotions anymore, because I was so drained from it.
Right. We are talking about educational systems, also the flaws within the systems. How was the experience at KPCB for you? Because you're second year students, right?
Yeah, second years.
How was it?
I have to be honest, I really have good experiences. I also know I did a bachelor in Germany and I had a lot of bad experiences. So I also know how it can be different. And I think our department really makes sure that it's a safe space and that you feel welcome and that, that nobody is excluded. Yeah.
If you compare your education in Germany, in Berlin, if I'm not mistaken, and your studies now, can you give examples of what works better now than in comparison to Germany?
I think open-minded, and a lot of my work is about colonialism and racism, and I feel that I can do that at KPK. And I think if there's something going on, you can have an honest conversation. And I think they're open for it, because you can always have an honest conversation with everybody, but if people are not open for it, it doesn't make any sense.
Is there knowledge there? Because one of the things that were mentioned as well is grading. Is the frame of reference there in order to truly understand topics like decolonialism? Because what we heard in previous episodes is a lot of teachers, they've been there for quite a while, and they stop developing their own frame of reference at a certain point. Is that something that you encounter?
No, absolutely not. Like, for example, I don't know if you know Gloria Wekker, who wrote a lot about colonialism in the Netherlands. And then one teacher mentioned that book, and then I'm like, oh, they actually really know this. Or I'm a big fan of Tina Kampt. She's a theorist. And then a teacher says her name, and I'm like, okay, so they're really up to date, and they have like a multicultural reference in their package. Yeah.
What's your experience?
I think we don't have the same background, because I have a background in architecture, and I also studied at the TU, just like Priscilla. But for me, it was a matter of pick and choose, and also listening a lot to what my peers are talking about, because I learned a lot from Charmaine, which really helped me to understand understand her work, but also contextualize myself, because I grew up in the Netherlands. We talk about these topics and themes.
And is it part of your studies as well?
Sorry, what do you mean?
The themes that you mentioned, so decolonialism or themes that are currently being discussed in society, how is that being entailed within the educational system? Because what you hear a lot is that a lot happens in society, and the education system is a bit slower than what happens to react to that. How does that work in The Hague?
Yeah, so what really helps me is that I can learn from my students in order to understand and actually use the same definitions and words and keywords they are using. And for me, I'm still finding out how to navigate through all this information, because my background is somewhere else. But
you do look with a critical eye on your background. You were trained as an architect, and you do look back critically on that as well, right?
Yeah, I do.
Why?
First of all, I really enjoyed my time in Delft, but what I felt like was that as an architect, I was trained to solve all the solutions in the world. And maybe that's not only a Dutch thing, because the Dutch are really optimistic about the water threat, but I felt like there are so many issues around us that we can't solve immediately, or we can't solve with merely a building or an object.
Like what?
Like bureaucracy, people that are excluded in public spaces, like racism, so all kinds of topics.
So you can't solve them with architecture, but can you solve them with photography?
I believe so. Because the thing is, most people see photography or a photograph as something flat that doesn't respond. But in the end, photography is also an object that has a form, that has a function. But the thing is, many photographers don't know what their function, like the function is of the images they produce. So to really create impact, either it's soft or hard impact, the photographer must believe in the medium, but also their work, and what they already need to have in mind what they want to achieve before even presenting it.
Do you agree with that?
In a way, but I don't think you have to. For me personally, I don't need to have it in mind before I present it. I make projects, and then afterwards I think, how should I present it? For example, I'm gonna do an exhibition at the Halle in Amsterdam, but for me that is so other people get familiar with a certain kind of topic, and it's on black hair. But I made that project like 2 years ago.
But what true impact does a photographer really have has on society?
I think
it's very limited, isn't it?
No, I think if you can start a dialogue with somebody, or if it makes a person think about something, I don't think we can change the whole world. But even if it's like one person, and that's an achievement.
But can you give an example on how you achieve that?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I think through showing the work, like exhibiting, but also thinking more unusual spaces to show the work. And normally when I show my work somewhere, I always have a conversation with at least one person about the work and who's interested or wants to know more behind it. And that's for me is enough.
If you talk about the hair exhibition, you've already made that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of a conversation you had with somebody in regard to that work?
That people don't know that it's really rude to touch people's hair with black hair. That a lot of people are like, oh, can I touch your hair? Yeah, because that's something about that is in the description of the project.
Right,
so yeah, added a couple of times. Yeah.
And your theory is that if you change one person, you can change the world?
No, if you can change one person, that it's enough. And
it's
we
enough.
can,
right.
and that we cannot change the world, I think. Yeah.
You believe you can't change the world?
No, I don't believe that, no.
Do you agree?
Yeah.
You can't change the world? That's a very gloomy
no, I think
vision on the world, isn't it?
I disagree. I think if you think that way, you're not trying to control what's happening. Like there's this big notion with especially capitalism where you can control things, everything's in your choice. And by accepting that you can't change the world, I think it brings so much liberation, and you can actually really start changing yourself and people around you. Instead of what is the world? Like even that notion, like what are you changing? Like it's the world changing us, not the other way around.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate because
Okay.
you do call yourself an activist, and you work from a certain ideal, or idealism is, one of the key things, key motivations as well. But you only do that not to change one individual, but you want to have an impact on society. You want to have an impact on the vision people have on neurodiversity, for example. So that is changing the world, isn't it?
Yeah, but as what you said, one person at a time. Do you know, like just by empowering maybe someone else who's neurodiverse is going to watch this video and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm not alone." You know, you can change, but by doing just small adaptations, and that's for me changing your world and the world of other people, not the world.
Right. We will come back to that. I would like to mention Menti again. If you would like to join into the conversation and ask some questions or add into the conversation, that is possible. So please go to menti.com, and the code you have to use will appear on screen as well. But in the meantime, thank you for the introductory talk. But before we move forward with the panel discussion, we would like to introduce a very exciting opportunity for upcoming designers, artists, researchers, and architects as well. So Thomas van der Sant, a program maker, sustainability at Pakhuis de Zwijger, will tell us more about that. A warm welcome to you, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Jurgen. Hi, everybody. So at Pakhuis de Zwijger, as part of a European program called Distributed Design, we have launched an open call where we're looking for designers, we're looking for researchers, startups, anybody, architects, photographers that are using their designs to not extract resources from the earth, but actually give them back, that are not creating social differences, but are actually creating social well-being. And they are doing that through the principles of distributed and regenerative design. So regenerative is all about circularity, it's about repair, it's about biomimicry, about building with nature. And distributed design is something that is in support of the maker community. And the maker community is like international, and it's based on these modern production techniques like, for example, laser cutting or 3D printing in combination with century-old crafts like woodworking or welding. And they're using that for super local, super catered solutions, like, for example, a machine that can reuse plastic for making something new. Or last year we had somebody who was making, for example, electric skateboards that were recycled. But you can also do something that's much more social. And we are in everything that touches upon, like for what Kate Raworth says is the donut economy is great. So we actually have a small movie where Kate Raworth is explaining something about both distributed and regenerative design.
If humanity is to live within the donut, we need to transform the dynamics of the global economy with two profound transformations. First, we have inherited linear, degenerative industrial systems. We take Earth's materials, stick them in the pipe of production, use it for a while, and then we throw it away. And this take, make, use, lose is pushing us over planetary boundaries and running down the living world. We need to turn that linear degenerative system into a circular or cyclical regenerative one, so that resources aren't used up, they're used again and again, far more carefully, collectively, slowly and creatively, so that we regenerate and repair the degradation of the living world. At the same time, let's recognize that we've also inherited systems that tend to be deeply divisive by design, whether through regulation, through privilege, through infrastructure and inheritance. We have systems that tend to drive value and opportunity into the hands of a few, resulting in the rise of a 1%. We need to turn these divisive economic systems into far more distributive ones, so that value and opportunity are shared far more equitably with all who co-create it. That turns out to be the whole of society. So, from degenerative to regenerative, from divisive to distributive, these are the dynamics of our economies that we must transform.
So that's Kate Raworth, and anybody who thinks that their design projects fits this distributed and regenerative design, there was a QR code that was shown. If you use that QR code or just go to the website of Pakhuis de Zwijger, you can find the open call and you can apply. And the ones we pick, they will be on all of our platforms, but also here in Pakhuis de Zwijger during a special distributed design event. We will showcase them on our stage. We will introduce them to relevant people within our network, and we'll invite them to come and join us at the Dutch Design Week, and we'll give them passepartout for visiting the Dutch Design Week for themselves as well. So I hope a lot of you will apply. Thanks very much.
Great. A warm hand for Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Back to business. I would like to talk this. We're entering the final stage of our discussion, and I would like to talk about changing the educational systems. Well, you know, with you, I'm done very quickly because everything is perfect. Nothing has to be changed within your educational system. Or am I wrong? There is actually silence.
But I think if we want some change, and I think that's a good thing that we have something that's called an education committee. So if something happens, we can actually say to them, we want to change this, and this is not working for us. But I think they should have that everywhere, where they give education, have some time to reflect, and have some time to have feedback from the students.
Are there no flaws at all in the past year that you spent at the academy? Doesn't anything, you know?
Yeah, we had, but we could address them.
Can you give an example of that?
I think a class was not really working out for us, to be really honest. So we addressed it. Yeah.
How do you address it, and what can be changed with that?
I think they can change it for the future students. I think that's also really important, that the things that you address or the things that you speak out about are a change for somebody else and not only for yourself.
So it's more about intergenerational thinking instead of only beneficial for your own good.
I think so, because if you want change won't come within a week most of the time. So if you really want change, you should also think about the future, about how other people will benefit from it.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think education systems can be more flexible, but also in a way that students can respond to what's happening in a class. So let's say we got a lecture from a professor, but then after the professor realized that it doesn't work, that there must be this backup plan to have immediately someone else for the next week.
But it also, sometimes it's a matter of taste, sometimes a lecturer, isn't really feeling the class. So to what extent do you take the opinion of a class into the identity of the school?
But that can be the whole timeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that, let's say, we are all different, but because we're different, in the end, there must be, we can take the same trajectory, but at some point there must be a moment, let's say, in the middle of a class, in which everyone can say, like, okay, what's the next move? What's the next strategy for the upcoming 6 weeks? And I think in that class, we're talking about, we really missed that. We had 12 weeks, which was nice for this group project, but there was no dialogue, actually. There was no dialogue from the teachers and the students, what we really needed. Because we have a class of 12 talented students, and we have all those skills and all this knowledge, but that wasn't used because it was a bit, they expected a bit, they wanted us to move forward and be proactive, but at the same time, it felt like they didn't really listen to us.
Priscilla, if you're still there, what is your vision on the educational system, and should it be a dialogue with the class and the lecturers?
I think, well, first of all, I'd like to say we are on the path there. I think we've come a long way in terms of education. I would say there should be more acknowledgement of other ways of doing, and that could come from having a more diverse classroom, so other students or other participants in the class can share how things are done where they're from or from their context. And then together it's almost like a pool of knowledge that the entire classroom can pick from, as opposed to having one modeled or a few modeled ways of doing. We acknowledge that there is a variety, but that has to reflect with also the diversity of the classroom as well.
Marijke, that does fit in your perspective of all those including different perspectives.
Yes.
But then again, doesn't it prove a challenge for the teacher or even for a school on how to, deliver, so to speak, the most well-trained students? Or what challenges that bring about?
I think the challenge for the teachers are that there should be a shift in the hierarchy if you want to have a more open structure in your class, because you have to allow your students to bring their own perspectives and their own knowledges and their own ideas to the table and talk about it. And the way I experienced education, and also now in my master's program, although they were trying to be very democratic, was still that it was the teacher bringing the knowledge.
Yeah. But sometimes, don't you have to acknowledge in a sense that those teachers, because of their years of experience in a certain field, do have that knowledge? So do you contest that, or how do you?
I wouldn't contest it. I would be open to it. And we were talking before about conditioned frames of references. And you also mentioned, I think, in the talk with Daisy, that the older you get, the more conditioned actually they become. And there's also a danger that you become a little bit fixed because it becomes automatically the way that you do things.
Yeah. I saw you nodding in agreement as well. Why?
Well, that's a hard question because I'm neurodiverse. It's quite hard for me to keep my focus for this long of a time.
Yeah.
So maybe if you could repeat like why I was nodding, because I'm nodding a lot.
Well, when we're talking about changing or even dismantling the hierarchy. That was something you agreed with as well. And you mentioned earlier as well that you do have a bit of a problem with hierarchy as well.
Yeah. Well, it's more that they have a problem with me, to be honest. But I always think a fun solution, because we talk a lot about change, but it takes years and years and years. And like, I want to live like a good life right now. So like what I've kind of developed in my practice is what I call like soft anarchism. It's like bringing attention to things that are problematic in a fun and a design approach way. Like, because I know that you're gonna be like what, Daisy? Like, what do you do? So, for example, like a tool for soft anarchism for me is like talking, but also, for example, marking places. So, for example, what I'm gonna do probably next week as homework for the Design Academy is I'm gonna tape in a very original way a space and like create a small space, a small performance to claim space. Because for me, it's a lot about taking up space, like having the courage and also the space to take up space. It's something we don't learn at school. So for me to come back to this question, because I kind of diverged, is just rethinking what we're teaching people. Because I think at a moment you said good quality student or something like that. Like, what does that even mean? Like, for me, a school is a place of opportunities and a place where we can try and be as equal as possible, because we're getting the same education, but we're all different. But why aren't we teaching cooking? Why aren't we teaching sewing? Like, all these different skills that not everyone has, and the more digital we get, the less skills we have. So I think schools could completely be a new space and not how we know them. But
what's the biggest objective for a school in that sense?
For me, if I had a school, it would be to, when the students leave, they have practical skills with their hands, but also how to present themselves. Because I come from France, and it's a lot about writing, which was horrible for me. And like, to be able to express yourself in public, it's not something we learn at school. But by not teaching people how to express themselves in public, we're teaching them that their opinion and their feedback isn't important, and that there's no space. So take up the space. And so schools, for me now, we can learn a lot on YouTube. But there's some skills that we don't have the infrastructure to learn. So cooking, loads of things like that.
It's more about theory and practice as well. I hear applause and agreement there. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to comment on what has been said right now? Why are you applauding? Why are you applauding that? Yes.
Because I agree with what you said. I am also neurodivergent. So for me, at school, a lot of things were difficult to understand. So I believe that the school system should be different in general.
And do you agree with the combination of the more practical and the more theoretical thread as well?
Yes, I agree. For example, how you were saying we should learn how to sew, but I was also thinking we should learn sign language, because what if something happens to you and you cannot talk anymore, but you need to communicate with someone? Everybody should learn sign language, so everybody knows what to do, what to say, how to act, or cooking, or I don't know how to say this in English, but belastingformulieren, how to do those types of things.
I know that word.
Taxes, you do know that word as well.
I mean, things that actually prepare you for your life, or finance, actual finance, like how to spend money or how to handle your money. Those things are things I think people should teach us at school, and not just, oh, you're 18 now, you have all these responsibilities, but you don't know how to do them. So it's kind of like more things that you actually meet in real life, I think.
Yeah. In regard to that, have you got the feeling, to all of you and Priscilla as well, that you are being prepared for real life? It's about, studying, getting the theory, getting the practice in as well, but also handling financial insecurities or securities. Are you being trained for that as well? But you disagree?
Especially in the Design Academy.
You ask if I disagree that should be
trained?
trained?
No. That you're already being trained or being prepared for that?
No, not at all. No. But I think now
in the educational system, they are more working with learning communities. So it's not that the teachers should learn you how to sue or to handle your finances, but you do it all together with your peers.
Yeah.
That's the idealistic
route as well.
Yes.
Priscilla, you do nod in agreement. So first, you did agree that you're not being prepared sufficiently for the real world in regard to finances, and you did agree with the fact that you should learn it by doing with others?
Yes, I do agree with that. I would say my education is a bit of a broad spectrum, so between 2 countries and 2 continents. But I wasn't prepared in any of the 2 for, how to handle my finances, and also just how to handle other aspects of life that are beyond, mainstream career, mainstream architecture, urbanism. So I do think that's important, because we need to be well-rounded human beings leading full lives. And I think that should be a key concern in education. And yeah, I think learning communities is one way of doing it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Any other questions from the audience or remarks that you would like to give? The microphone is heading to you.
Hi, I was wondering, I graduated from Fashion Academy 2 years ago, and me and my peers from the academy have been talking a lot about that what we're kind of missing from university is that they don't do what we say is pre-care and aftercare, in a sense of that they don't help you to see what's going to come after, in a sense of, okay, because they always say you're going to end up in this black hole if you're a creative and you don't know what's next. But then it also, the environment doesn't feel inviting enough to when you graduate. You're like, okay, I will just email my last teacher or reach out to someone from the university to see how they can maybe give me some extra advice on how to manage my newfound freedom and career. And I was wondering how you felt about that, because it's more on the mental health side of it as well.
On the mental health side?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because I feel like if you, as a teacher, tell someone you're going to go in this black hole, but you're not trying to help someone not even get in it or help someone get out, I feel like it's not supportive, and it's I would say almost depressing as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it's a great description, the prepare and aftercare as well. What should schools do in that regard? Thank you so much for your question.
So what we have in our program are study coaches, and there are people that are alumni from our program. So they have experience actually the same as we are currently doing. And what we do is we meet with them once a week. Once a month, sorry. Once a week is a bit too much. But once a month, in which we just talk about stuff such as mental health, but also the workload and the whole curriculum. So yeah, I think we earlier mentioned the fact that there's a timeline on the curriculum, but maybe we also need to think about that this timeline can be extended. So after you graduated, there must be a group or a whole network you can join in, so you can build your career on top of that or on that.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because it's quite a simple thing that you can manage to do, but it's not there yet. There is no support, alumni support, where you can support each other, or is there?
I know that in our education they're actually working on the alumni program, and they sometimes hire alumni to give, to help with what's called roundtables or to give classes and things like that. Yeah. But maybe also, because I also get your question, and I think what I'm not talking now only about photography society, but in general, what I sometimes see with art students is that the schools don't really get real. So they should be getting real, okay, you need to get a job and you need to provide for yourself. And the world is not only about your art. Because if you're done with school and you don't get study finance anymore, you have a problem if you're still in that bubble. So
but how can you do that within school? How do you do that in practice?
I think you should just give a class about finances, about grants, and also about working, and for example about taxes, because it's something that a lot of artists struggle with. So
absolutely. Yeah. If you talk about workload for students at the moment, how do you experience it to be? Is it good? Is it too much? Is it not enough?
Well, I think Yeah. Sorry. I think it's really, yet again, it's case by case. You know, someone who has like ADHD might be able to hyper focus and in one night produce something, but then for the next 3 weeks. And I think a lot of, I think mental health is really important because it not only talks about neurodiversity, but it talks about everyone in a whole. And if we all took better care of our mental health, and I just think school time is too long for, I just feel like everything is too long. For example, we work for so many hours. We have to go to school so many hours. So it takes away the time that we could be organizing an alumni club or whatever it's called. When you graduate, alumni. I just feel we should be taking the rhythm down. We're trying to compact so much education in such a small time. But instead of doing that, what I would, if I designed a school, I would actually design a school for people who, after they've had work. I feel like from the age of 40 to the age of 43, you have to go back to school again, for example. Just like I'm kind of utopist in a way, but I just think that would solve our problems of teachers who are already like, oh, I already know everything. But if it's expected to, school is way throughout your life, and then it's a good way to make new friends, to find new hobbies. I just think school should be dispatched more instead of being this big block of so much fun at the beginning and then work until you die.
There is already talk about that. And lifelong learning is of course a topic, and I
didn't design this.
And I do recognize that as well, because I did my master's after working for about 8 years in the field, and then I did my master's, which is very beneficial because then you know very specifically what you want to get out of an educational system, and that helps as well. But that lifelong learning, it is a very trendy topic at the moment. But how can you really motivate people into doing that and create systems where it's acceptable? Because when you're building a career within your 40s, you're usually in your almost peak. You can't take time off in order to study, can you?
I did.
How did you manage to do that? Because then you had to break off what you were doing.
Yes. So fortunately, I had the opportunity, of course, and I'm very privileged that I had this opportunity. And I worked a lot in evenings. And I also have a family that I have to maintain. So, yeah, it asked a lot from my family.
So the system is not geared yet in order to provide the opportunities to learn when you're further in your career.
No, I don't. It depends on the case, of course. Yes, and also my master was a part-time master. So, but then again, I had to do a lot by myself. But still, I think it would be good if there were scholarships for people who want to go study again. And I did get a little bit of support from the government, but I had to go through this very long, extensive procedure to get like €1,000 for 2 years study. So, there could be more support.
Priscilla, what's your vision on the lifelong learning? Is that something that is feasible as well, or should you just have your education in practice as soon as you graduate?
I agree with lifelong learning. I think things are changing so dynamically in life generally that if you studied, for example, in my case, architecture, and you graduated in 2015, in 2025, things are different, you know. Maybe theories are being questioned, theories that you held as truth are being questioned, and things like that. So there should be an opportunity for you to revisit, which may not exist if you're, you know, just practicing and just running your career. You may never have the time to sit and reflect. So I think it would be important. It's a bit of an ideal, I think, because life catches up with people. But I think it would be nice if everyone who at least wanted to study had the opportunity to do so.
And there are grants by the government to only €1,000, but still, it's more than nothing.
That's true.
We're heading to the end of the program, and I would like to each of you ask, is there anything that you take away from tonight that you will put in practice in your studies or in life? Like, can I start with you?
I'm very happy to hear your stories. And I liked very much what you said about soft anarchism. I think that's something that I would like to include in the game also.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I think that's what I'm going to take. Yes.
Soft anarchism.
Well, for me, I just think collaboration is the key. I'm sure, like, with everyone in this room who actually came here today, we could do so much more things because we're from different backgrounds, and I kind of feel in the government, a lot of the government people normally come from the same background, same schools, or at least where I grew up from. And like, if we just took this room here today and actually did a brainstorming and actually had the fundings and the time, like, the world could change.
Very, very good. Thanks so much.
I think for me, more looking at the individual and about people's personal needs to develop themselves with education.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, stay optimistic.
You had to come here to learn that.
A bit.
Yes, thank you so much. We've come to the end of the program, and I would like to thank you all for sharing your thoughts and ideas. And what I take away from here is that the educational system should be geared to the students, and too often it's as an institute for itself that is there to maintain that institute, and to have that individual learning course and that learning path for people there, and have that being the main objective is something that I do very much agree with. Also with the lifelong learning, the fact that you start your education but you're not done after 4 years. It only starts after 4 years, and enabling people in order to do that is very important. And what I take away from what you said as well is that communication is key, that you still have to, it's not a top-down vision on what the topics are as well, but it's also about communicating. While talking, I realized that I didn't ask Priscilla for her takeaway. Priscilla, what is your takeaway from tonight?
I think mine is just the importance of having discussions like this, and to break out of my own mind and people who think like me, so maybe the same career or same background, and just be open to having discussions with people from different backgrounds and different careers, and just share and learn from each other.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories. For the people that are here, Marijke is going to explain her game, and maybe we're going to play it as well. So people at home, you are missing out. But we will return also online on the 19th of September for the first episode of the Decolonial Design with inspiring speakers. Check out the Designing City for All page at the website of De Zwijger. This was our first program after the summer vacation, so it's good to be back. But you can always see the previous programs on online as well. From the 24th till the 28th of October, we'll also co-host a series of programs in collaboration with the TU in Eindhoven at the Dutch Design Week in Eindhoven. So you're based in Eindhoven, so we will be visiting you as well.
Well, you're all welcome.
Remember, don't forget our pay-as-you-like opportunity. So if you would like to give a contribution to the programs of Pakhuis de Zwijger, that is possible. Please go to dezwijger.nl/pay, and every contribution you make there will benefit the programs directly. Thank you so much for watching, and please check the website for more information. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.